You know, it's funny that you say that because one of my favorite conversations about Trek is that every single time I watch it, in whatever point of my life that I'm in, I feel like I get something new out of it. Because when you watch something when you are a child or a teenager, and then watch it again later in your 20s, 30s, 40s, so on, you have experienced new experiences in your own life and you start to understand some of the thematic elements and the characterization in ways that you didn't recognize when you were younger. And so I like that how in every phase of my life I can rewatch Star Trek and have a completely new experience with it. Recently, I was at my parents' house and I was going through a bunch of my stuff that's in their basement. They're trying to get me to get rid of. And I actually found a picture that I drew of Odo, and I had dated it. And I dated it at age like 7. And I thought to myself,
Wow.
I don't remember that I was watching Star Trek at that age, but I must have been. Um, I got into Star Trek because of my mom. Actually, Harrison Ford is the reason I watched Star Trek, which is always kind of a funny topic to bring up. My mom was a huge Harrison Ford fan, and the one rule in our house when I was a child was that I was allowed to watch rated R movies as long as Harrison Ford was in them because she thought they were okay.
There's a few. Yeah, there's a few of them. Yeah.
So she got me into Indiana Jones, and then from Indiana Jones into Star Wars. And once I finished watching Star Wars, I was so hooked onto sci-fi. That was like my first real foray into like official sci-fi, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And
Same here. I mean, that's my tattoo,
oh, I
Star
love
Wars.
it.
That's
Yeah, perfect. No,
yeah.
but then I kept watching it. I honestly watched Star Wars until the VHS broke, and my mom was like, "Let's find you something else." And she went to the video store and she rented Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Oh, okay.
And I must have been thinking back now, I must have been 5 or 6 or something. I must have been very young, and that was a little bit too slow of a film for me at that age. Because I remember falling asleep during it and waking up and the same thing was happening. I just remember like blue sky, blue
Yeah.
space. Um, but that was actually my first foray into Star Trek. But from there, I found the other Star Treks, the older ones, the original series, and then on to Next Generation. And of course,
Yeah.
by then I was hooked. And apparently, I was watching Deep Space Nine quite young because of those photos of Odo that I'd drawn. So,
It's definitely left an impact, like
yes.
consciously or not, it left an impact that you went out to draw it. It's
Yeah.
interesting you say your intro was into motion picture because that was mine as well. Taken,
Oh,
and I went
really?
and saw it at the theatre because I'm that old. But I went and saw it at the theatre at 5 or 6, and I was actually same thing, fell asleep. And I remember falling asleep and just I don't think I got up till the end of the film. So it's a tough one. For me, it was Next Generation because I was around that age when that,
Yeah.
you know, being a bit of a nerd, that like at 15 or 16 when that started going. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
you
funny
started.
thinking about it now because oh, I was just saying it's funny thinking about it now because you either were catching things as they were airing, like Next Generation was airing when I was very young, but or you were catching like the Saturday reruns of TOS, which is the one that I was watching the most when I was really young because those ones my
Yeah,
mom remembered them and she was like, "Yeah, these were okay for you to watch." Um, and then of course I
but
got into
what
Next
did you
Generation
have
later.
any that really stuck out at that time, like episodes from the TOS that made an impact when you were a kid?
Oh, the Mirrorverse episode, of course. I just
Yes.
remember being so shocked, Spock coming on screen with the beard and all of the characters being switched, which
Yep.
actually, from a writing standpoint, and I think really influenced me later because
Mhm.
I love this idea of universes within universes and being
Mhm.
able to reimagine the characters in different ways. So that one definitely stood out to me um, as one of my favorite episodes from back then.
Yeah, look, it is a fantastic episode, isn't it? And clearly on, I mean, as we kind of lead further to we get to your career, but early on, then you're getting exposed to some very interesting storytelling. even then, aren't you?
Star Trek has some of the best storytelling, long form storytelling, I think, of any series. And
Mm,
whenever somebody comes to me and they say, if I want to watch something to be inspired to write, not like if I want to read something to be inspired to write, but if I wanted to watch something that has
mm.
great characterization, great plot lines, great follow through storytelling, I tell everybody, I said, watch Deep Space Nine. Deep
Oh,
Space Nine is some of the best writing on television that
yeah.
television has ever seen, I think.
Without question. I mean, the episodes, like it's clear that you can pick out a top 10 episodes of that very, very easily. And then you got to look at even the last couple of seasons, which for me are almost flawless. Season 6, I absolutely adore, and season
Six is
7, even
fantastic.
though does a bit of a
You
change,
know,
but I'd still like. There's a
it's
couple of episodes
funny.
a little bit rocky in there, but
Yeah. It's funny. I just did a rewatch of Deep Space Nine recently, and I always remember that I used to stop at the end of season 6 because I was just like, oh, I can't stand those last few episodes of season 6 because they're just so emotionally difficult. But I
yeah.
pushed through this time. I went right into season 7. And for all of its flaws, season 7 did a good send off to Deep Space Nine. I think of all the Trek so far, they got the most fulfilling ending for the characters.
I would absolutely agree, and I mean that was purposeful, I believe, wasn't it? That they
I
knew
think
that
so.
this was the last season. We're just going to go for it. Some hit, and some missed, didn't it?
Hmm.
For me, like the Next Generation is the one that I remember being very formative in the way I saw storytelling and that, and it was so to me so fresh in the sense that I wasn't watching it on TV. I actually had because they wouldn't air it properly here in Australia, but they released them on VHS. So I
Right.
go to the video store and rent 2 episodes at a time, and a lot of it cost me a lot of money to watch Star Trek Next Generation,
Yeah.
basically, but worth it, of course. But yeah, that would had a massive influence kind of over me. And then Deep Space Nine, I think I was lucky because I aged into it. Like I was a little bit like 16, 17 to about 21, 22, I suppose, to watch Next Gen. But as I got a bit more mature, Star Trek got a bit more mature.
Yeah.
With
It's
Deep
funny that
Space
you say
Nine.
that because one of my favorite conversations about Trek is that every single time I watch it,
Mm,
in whatever point of my life that I'm in, I feel like I get something new out of it. Because when you watch something when you are a child or a teenager, and then watch it again later in your 20s, 30s, 40s, so on, you have experienced new experiences in your own life and you start to understand some of the thematic elements and the characterization in ways that you didn't recognize when you were younger. And so I like that how in every phase of my life I can rewatch Star Trek and have a completely new experience with it.
absolutely. You find sometimes new moments that you emotionally connect with that you just didn't see before.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a lot of things can influence that, and absolutely, certainly age. One of the interesting things I've found about Trek, especially being old enough to remember a lot of it, thankfully not old enough to remember the 60s, um, is that we've seen 2 phases of it. We went from the Bergman era, as everyone likes to call it, the Bergman era, to new Trek. How did you find that? Like, it had been gone for a while. We had the movies, and then have you found this new? They're calling it a golden age, but what do you think?
It's really interesting because I have to credit Leonard Nimoy for helping me into New Trek
Mm,
because I had been a big Star Trek fan growing up. And then when I was in college, there wasn't really any Star Trek on. Enterprise
mm,
had ended recently. I was still at my university getting my bachelor's, and there really wasn't anything. And then a few years later, Leonard Nimoy came to my university and he gave a talk. And I was in the English program at the time,
so cool.
and yeah, and everybody at the English department, I don't know why, were given free tickets. And I think it was because originally the English department head had tried to get Stephen King to come and visit and he had to cancel and they got Leonard Nimoy instead. So I got free tickets to this event. And of course, as a huge Star Trek fan, I was very excited. And I got there and he started talking about the new films that were coming out. This was before the 2009 Trek film had come out. And he was talking about how what he was allowed to say he talked about essentially, and he talked about how he was very excited for this new phase of Trek and that how he believed it was really going to usher in a new generation of Trek lovers, new generation of Trekkies, but also bring in a new love for the older Trekkies as well.
Mm,
And so I went into it quite excited. And And then I worked at a movie theater at the time, so I made uniforms for everybody. So the opening weekend of the first Star Trek film with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, my theater was decked out.
Yeah.
We had all the ushers in,
That's
red, all
fantastic.
of the concessions people in gold. I mean, it was fun. But yeah, I love what new Trek has done. I think
Yeah.
this is exactly what Trek needed. It needed this injection of newness, of freshness, uh, of of change. And I
Yeah.
think I'm looking forward to seeing what else they
Well,
come up with.
I think what's been so great about it, it's not only they brought in their change, but they haven't pulled back on being bold.
No.
And I
Yes, you're
think
right.
that's one of the great strengths about it as well. They continue to be bold and try to push out different elements of stuff, but they've got the benefit of the legacy, but also the burden of the legacy as well.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
they're doing an excellent job managing those two so far. I mean, if you'd said to me 2 years ago, Starfleet Academy, or even 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, I would still be, we don't want that show. Why don't they give us that? But, I've quickly flipped on it
Yeah.
because the casting and starting to hear things of what they're going to do. And it's going to be different. And I love the fact that we know now it's in the Discovery Year 3000 timeline.
Mhm.
I'm all in. Plus, I'm a big
Yeah.
Paul Giamatti fan. He's amazing.
I am too. I'm too. I'm very excited.
I saw a movie with him this year called The Holdovers. It's absolutely brilliant. A
Yes.
brilliant
Yes.
performance.
And
Yeah.
actually, I'm extra excited because one of the new cast members, one of the new students from Starfleet Academy, saw one of my videos on TikTok and actually liked it. And I was like,
Wow. There
and
you
for
go.
me, that's like a big fan moment. I'm very excited. But you're right. I do think that, Star Trek had its challenges going into this new season, especially when it comes to making new television series. I think movies kind of stand on their own. In a way, I think it's probably easier to make a Star Trek movie nowadays than it is to make a Star Trek series. I
Mm,
think a lot of people, when they challenged um, Discovery, I think it was because Star Trek lends itself so well to this episodic storytelling that we saw in the past with Next Generation
mm,
and Voyager, where you could watch a single episode and not have to know exactly what came before and what comes after. But I feel like with the advent of streaming and this change that television has taken, they had to make a new direction, and then they did that with Discovery. It was a risk. I
yeah.
think it paid off. I think it was worth it.
It took me a couple of seasons to accept it, to be honest with you, because I was
Yeah,
so focused on the old format.
right.
But that show for me personally just got stronger and stronger and stronger. I thought they stuck the landing extremely well
They
for that
did.
series. Season 4, I absolutely adore. There were things about that show that were, when we talk about bold storytelling, they kind of pushed it. And I'm glad that they did, because I think it starts conversations that needs to be had. And that's what
Yeah,
Star Trek's is great at, is putting a
exactly.
mirror on what is going on in our society and reflecting. And I think, yeah, the writers really could hold their heads up high in many of those episodes. Actually, my biggest beef was the Klingon. I had a problem with makeup, basically, Karen. I couldn't get over the Klingons. But I've accepted it
The Klingons,
now.
I had trouble with the Klingons in the beginning, but then I just reminded myself that Klingons have a long history of physical change, and I just, I said, "You know
Yeah.
what? We're just
You
gonna
know
go with
what?
it."
You know what my headcanon is? My headcanon is, well, the Klingon homeworld's just like Earth, and all the corners of the Earth, everybody looks different.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
you
if
know,
we're gonna be
so from
really
Aaron
if
DeMercy episode I watched the other day, it'd be like, oh yeah, they live in, say, the southern part of,
right.
the planet, and then you've got Discovery
I mean,
guys
if
are
we're
more
gonna
live
be
up
really
north.
picky yeah, if we're gonna be really picky, we can say what happened to one of B'Elanna Torres's head ridges,
Yeah.
halfway through Voyager that disappeared.
Yeah,
Worf,
yeah.
his forehead ridges have changed, miraculously over the years, so I feel like it's just a Klingon part
Yeah.
of Klingon anatomy to, go through some deep physical forehead changes,
Yeah, which they
uh,
never talk about, which they
which
no
they
no
never talk
never
about.
talk
We
about.
don't talk about
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. So I must say, we're actually filming this. I'm in Australia, in the bottom of Australia, and you're the way in the Netherlands, I believe.
I am. Yes, I am. I'm close to the German border, so quite a
Fantastic.
ways away. Yeah.
Yeah, like the modern world. Just, I love this. This is what I love about especially in the last few years of podcasting, and obviously the internet being up to standard now, that we can do this. And You know, I think it's a wonderful gift, and one of the good things about social media too is seeing people like yourself from all different corners of the world and things like that. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today is because of your social media. Because what I find fascinating about you, Karen, is there is really I feel like, and I mean this is the biggest compliment, two sides to your public persona, which I think
There
is
is.
wonderful. There's this very joyous, celebrating Star Trek fan who does these exceptionally wonderfully great timed videos,
Thank you.
always full of color, always full of joy, always, if you're feeling in a bummer mood, just go to your channel I think, and just scroll for a little bit and you're totally good. And
Thank you.
then what I found about you, and I found this after, is that you're an author of how many books now, Karen? Is it 7 or
I have 4 that are
4?
published,
4
and I'm
published.
currently working on my 5th one, which, fingers crossed, we'll find out, next year what's going on with that one.
Great. Well, the fact that not only are you an author, but you're an author of some pretty dark material, some
Yeah.
psychological crime thrillers,
Yes.
which I thought was just awesome. My wife is a fan. She's read one of your books, and funnily enough, today, earlier in the morning, I actually signed up to Audible because I'm that old now, Karen. If I try to read a book, no matter if it's the best book in the world, 5 pages in, I'm snoring. So I've
I'm
ordered a
the
couple of
same.
I've ordered Last One
I
Alive.
struggle too.
Yeah. So I'm going to be listening to your books, but my wife, big fan. She read Sweet Little Lies, an absolute huge
Thank
fan of
you.
that. But it's very, like I said, I found it instantly fascinating that you have these your public persona is two very different sides, and I think that's awesome. And I think that's a way for you. Is it like an outlet? Do you use social media as a way to this is a way for me to deal with the trauma I'm putting through myself by writing these books?
I mean, I wouldn't say that's too far off. When I started social media, I was just focused on trying to make it a professional social media for my writing, for my books, for publication. And while I do enjoy making that kind of content, I just felt like I was really missing something. And then, of course, the pandemic came along, and I wasn't going anywhere. In the Netherlands, we had a very strict policy about people leaving the house. And because I essentially worked from home, I was in my house for a year of lockdown. And so that's how
Mm.
I got into TikTok. And I just thought to myself, what can I do that I enjoy, that I find fun? And I saw the people doing their cosplays on TikTok and talking about things like Star Trek. I'm like, well, I love cosplays. I loved Star Trek. I'm just gonna jump in and into this group. And so it did become a balance between the heavy thematic stuff that I write. And then what I think is a little bit more of my, outgoing personality, a little bit more of the less of the writerly side, but more of the fun, creative side, which is, talking about Star Trek, dressing up in costumes, doing the dances. I mean,
But
anything to
see,
just kind of add fun.
the thing is, what I'm going to say is, you've got a real talent for it. I think there's a skill that's involved to do really good social media content. The way you present yourself, the way you connect with the camera, the way you light it, and things like that. You seem to have got that nailed.
Oh, thank
You've
you.
got that kind of sorted out, and it's really great because when it comes up, you instantly, because there's always very bold colors that you use with different color backgrounds, and you, like I said, light yourself perfectly. It's great because it kind of attracts you straight away, and like I said, it's always something positive. It's not like you're going on there and going, you're paying so many taxes next year, or you're not doing anything negative.
Yeah.
It's super
Yeah.
kind of,
Well, I kind
and
of
yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say I didn't wanna see negative stuff either, and I noticed that the more you put out of a certain type of content is the kind of content you see back, like, on your FYP,
Mm,
and I wanted to see positive, fun stuff. I wanted to see exciting discussions about topics that I loved.
mm,
I didn't wanna see all of that negative stuff, so I kind of purposely was, like, putting out as much, fun, happy, uplifting, optimistic content that I could, to try and get that back in a way as well.
mm.
And as for the lighting, I mean, it's gotten progressively better. I mean, if you see my really early stuff, you will see that I struggled to light. I struggle to
It's
put
the
on some
key,
of my
isn't
wigs,
it? Good
but it's
lighting works
fun.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like I said, it's a positive it's you're inviting people to celebrate the fandom that you also celebrate. So
Yeah.
there's a kind of openness to it as well, which is again is may not be something that you're consciously thinking about, but it's coming off like that. So it's great. And you must have some really great positive response from people
I mean, I
occasionally.
do. It's fun because, especially certain characters will reach a certain demographic. And I discovered recently that, for example, if I post a video dressed as Jedzia or
Mm.
as Archer from Enterprise, it goes straight to Germany. I don't know what it is,
Oh, okay.
but people in Germany, they love Jedzia and they love
Yeah,
Archer and Enterprise.
yeah,
And it was just in a single day, I would get like 300 followers
yeah.
just from Germany and just their enthusiasm for the costumes and the makeup or
Mm.
wanting to know how I did the spots.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, and then just people wanting to show their appreciation for Star Trek and how they saw my video and then they remembered how much they missed watching that show or how much they enjoyed uh, discussing that show, and it's just
Mm.
great to build that kind of community with people.
Yeah.
So I really
It's
enjoyed it.
I find the Generation X I am and the next generation, nostalgia's become one of the most important currency in our life. Like, we live for nostalgia, and there's nothing negative about that. We trying to hold on to memories of good times, and hence why, like myself, still watch the old Star Wars films. I love the old like, Next Generation's always playing in the house at some point. Um, and I think that's a real positive thing. And I think that's one of the things that's kicked off with fandom and that is that you remind them you're going back to those simple emotions where whatever
Yeah,
that your thing that was into made you feel a certain way. And it's a real treat, and it isn't it's a new art form. I
it
really
is.
believe this new social media influences this connection where art has inspired art is is a gift. So yeah, it's very cool.
I mean, it's definitely for me been very rewarding in the sense that not only have I been able to kind of challenge myself to see what can I do, what am I capable of when it comes to making a video? Like, can I make something that's going to, engage other people and reach
Mm,
them in a way that will add this positivity to their lives and add some fun or some reminder of Star Trek? But it's also been kind of humbling because I've had a few experiences where people have seen my videos and I'm not really a con person. I've only been to one Comic Con in my entire life. It's something I want to
mm,
change. I'd like to do more of that. But there are
mm,
quite a few people who follow me and they cosplay at cons and on at least 3 occasions I've had them reach out to me and say, I showed your video to the actor that you were
mm.
portraying. Like, I showed your video to Terry Farrell, and I was just like, or I showed your video to Anson Mount of you dressed as
Yeah,
Pike, and I'm just, it's so unbelievably overwhelming, but it's
yeah.
so gracious. I mean, it's
I
so
think that's a compliment to
incredible.
the level of cosplay that you're doing, though, because I think that's yeah, it's the fact that it's
I
kind of
think
a
it's
high
also a
level.
compliment to just Yeah. Oh, I think it's just a compliment too to just how much people love these characters because, you know, even if the cosplay isn't great, even if it's homemade and you're wearing like, tape
Very
on your
true.
ears, I mean, it's still fantastic. I love it. I
Yeah.
love it all. I love all the cosplay.
Absolutely, and, for you, it's because 'cause you're a very expressive person, so your enthusiasm just
Yeah.
fires out of you, which is fantastic. I think that's awesome. So I think that helps you as well in that kind of thing. Would you say are you socially like that normally?
You know,
Or are you say you're more comfortable sometimes being behind a camera being like that?
it's funny. I would say that up until about 5 years ago or so, I was very much like that in person. I was very much like kind of I wouldn't want to say like hyperactive, but definitely on that very extroverted side of the scale. And I feel like in the last few years, maybe because I live in the Netherlands and the Dutch are a little bit more toned down now.
Yeah.
Um, uh, or just not getting out as much as I used to. I feel like I'm a little bit more reserved now. But when I find that group of people who has that same level of enthusiasm or the same excitement for what I'm doing, and
Mm.
they're also doing something similar, whether it's also cosplaying or making videos on something that they love, I do feel that like that extroverted nature coming out a little bit more.
Mm.
I mean, I do love meeting new people. I love, I'm not going to hide myself in my house all the time and just watch Star Trek, although I'm perfectly fine doing that. But I love meeting people who have the same interests and share the same enthusiasm for it.
I'm generally the same, though I find now I'm a bit older, like, I go to, like, I love sports, so I've got a football team and Australian rules football team that I follow here. 50,000 people go every couple of weeks to this game, and I go to them very comfortable. I can't really do shopping centres and that much without feeling a little bit anxious and getting a little bit like in my shell, which is totally not like me. Like you,
Yeah.
I'll go into the room, I'm like, hey, everybody, you may not see me, but you're going to hear me.
Yeah.
You know, in a nice way, of course, but yeah,
I mean, I guess if you walked
it's
into the grocery store and said that, that would be a little bit strange, though. So maybe
yeah.
it
What it
makes
is,
more
I
sense.
figured out it's the lack of order, which is weird. I don't know what it says
Oh,
about me in shopping centers that because everyone just walks everywhere,
that's
and I think
true.
that's what it is. It's the chaos of the shopping center. For some reason, I don't
It may
process well.
It may also be too that I feel like, when you're walking into a football match or you're walking into a Comic Con,
Mm,
you and everybody
yeah,
around you is there for a very similar purpose and for a very
ex-
similar,
yeah,
you're both there because you enjoy the team or you're there
yeah,
to share your cosplays or meet your favorite stars. And when
yeah,
you're walking into the local shopping center, I think everybody's kind of there with their blinders
yeah.
on, like I'm here to get my socks and milk, and then I'm going home.
Yeah, when I was the first time I actually went to a con in America was this year. It was earlier this year in New Jersey, and before I was flying over there, I'm thinking, I'm going to host some panels. I got to speak to Ethan Phillips
Oh,
we did
brilliant.
host a panel with him and that. And I was a little bit, but actually, once I was there, it was amazing, awesome. I'm with my people. It was a great,
Yeah.
great special weekend. So if you do get to go to cons, the best thing I noticed about that is even though I flew 7,000 miles, whatever, to get there, it just felt like it was a warm blanket. Everybody was on the same page and having a good time.
Was this Trek Long Island?
There was a trek Long Island,
I
and
really wanted to go.
yeah,
I was very close, and then things just didn't work out, but I'm
it
keeping my
just
fingers crossed.
I was told because I haven't been to Star Trek Las Vegas or anything, but my mate said to me, "Look, it's so many people there. It's
Yeah.
exponentially bigger." I like the size of the one at Trek Long Island. I think there were, 5 to 10,000 people at some point, but the way they laid it out was fantastic,
Oh,
and
that's great. I
yeah, we got a really
actually
good,
I am planning to attend one next year. I have
yeah,
bought my tickets, so it's official. I haven't
awesome,
said anything about it. I'll say it now. I'm
yeah,
going to FedCon, which is
fantastic.
in Germany. I've seen a lot of people go to it. Not really anybody I know. There's like one or two people I know from TikTok that will be there. And I'm just gonna go. I'm going by myself. I don't know anybody. It's gonna be an adventure.
You will
Uh,
be recognized.
we'll just
There's
see
no
how
doubt
we'll see
about
what
it.
happens.
Someone's gonna come up to you and go, "Karen." Well, if
Yeah.
someone recognized me, little old
Oh
me in
wow.
Trek Long Island, they're gonna recognize you, no worries.
Well, we'll see.
I love the Germans too because, they're big Master of the Universe fans, and I'm a
Oh,
big Master
okay.
of the Universe nerd. Them
I
and
saw that on
Brazil.
your interview with Michael Chan. I saw that you were.
Yeah, Brazil and Germany seem to love it.
Wow.
So, they're, like, really big into it. So their cosplay's always magnificent and all that. You'll have a great time. You'll have a
I hope
great
so.
time
I mean,
for
I'm
sure.
looking
Yeah,
forward to it. I think the hardest thing right now is gonna be figuring out which cosplays to bring.
yeah. You mentioned Michael Chan. One of the great things about all this experience too, you say, is meeting new people, correct? Is that how you
Yes.
met Michael, through social media? And
Yeah, I met him
yeah.
through TikTok on Trek Talk.
Mm,
And I mean, I don't know what he'd say about it, but I like to think that we're pretty good friends now. We talk on a regular basis.
mm.
We're both doing the Star Trek Conquerors Challenge together right now with a few other people from Trek Talk, which is really fun. He's actually read my book. I try to catch his films and stuff and when they're on TV. I mean, just a fantastic guy. And it's so
Oh,
amazing to
he
meet
is.
other creative people who are
Yeah.
pursuing their passions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you hear his story of like how he kind of and the fact what that meant to him too, to be on the set and to do
Yeah.
everything. And yeah, he's a
Oh,
great guy. I found him more from he was booked on to come onto the show, but I actually known him beforehand because his dad joke stuff would come up, and I love a
Yes.
good dad joke. The
So
cringier, the
funny.
worse, the better. And he would do crackers that would just, and the way he delivered a deadpan and that, I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, he's
He is
fantastic.
great.
Yeah,
He's great. He's a phenomenal actor. Phenomenal
yeah,
actor. I'm
yeah,
really looking forward to
absolutely.
seeing his career progress, and
Popularity
if he
Papers, check it out. He's really
so
good in
good.
that. Really good.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But you meet like same here. I've met all these new friends now through this type of thing, and it does create like connections that you wouldn't normally have thought of would have existed 10 years ago. You wouldn't have been thinking in that thing, and I think it's certainly been really great. Like the positive to come from COVID was this. If there was
Yes.
a positive, it was the fact that it kind of forced this almost this subculture to really kind of shine, which I think fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're in the Netherlands, but were you
Yes.
born and raised in the Netherlands? So the
No.
accent, no, the
So I'm
accent doesn't match.
originally
Sorry.
no, no. No, I'm originally from the United States, but my mother's from Sweden, so
Mm,
half of my family is in Norway and Sweden,
mm,
my dad was in the military, so when I say I'm from the United States, I'm literally from everywhere. I think I've
yeah,
lived in, like, 12 different states. We moved,
yeah.
like, 30 times before I graduated high school,
Wow.
so I've
What do they
been a
call that? Do
little
they
bit
call that
everywhere.
the army brat? Is a kid who does
Yeah, but I
that, or
was yeah, but we lived on it my dad it's so tricky. My dad was in the Navy, but we lived on Air Force bases, so I guess
oh,
I was an Air Force brat.
Air Force brat? Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you find that? Like growing up in that kind of with that, you know?
You know, when I was a kid, I thought it was fun. I, like, actually enjoyed it. I liked it. I
Yeah.
got really used to this process of picking up and moving. When I got to be a little bit older, like a teenager, I started realizing, like, it was difficult to make friends because I think this is probably why I became so extroverted when I was
Mm,
younger is because I kind of had to be. We would
mm,
move and I'd have to make friends as quickly as possible, but then also know in the back of my mind, we might not be here more than a year.
mm.
So it was always like this challenge to be like, okay, I have to like on the very first day of school, I have to be like, hi,
Yeah.
who likes Star
Yeah.
Trek or whatever, or who likes
Yeah.
Star Wars, or
Yeah.
find the friend group really quickly. So I do think it helped me in the sense of being comfortable talking to new people and kind of finding a way into different groups of people. But of course, yeah, later
Mm.
as an adult, I can look back and see, yeah, it would have been nice to have had a steady stream of like friendships that stuck around. Because of
Yeah.
course, we didn't have
Oh,
social media or cell phones back then
no,
to keep in
that's
contact.
right.
We were writing
Yeah.
letters, but, 7-year-olds aren't great at writing letters.
No, no, they're not. But I
Mhm.
would dare say it also you built resilience over that period too.
I think so.
There were
Yeah.
the really good life skills that you like via osmosis of
Yeah.
developing in that kind of scenario.
Yeah.
And I moved schools a little bit when I was young and all that kind of thing. I left school actually young and went and become a tradesman for many years before I now run a videography business. So life can take you in strange
Fantastic.
directions. But yeah, so but did you go to uni, college? How
I
did
did. And this is funny because when I was watching your interview with Michael the other day, I realized how similar we are here.
mm,
He talked about how he was in the sciences at university, and so I
yeah,
actually have two bachelor's degrees I got from university in the states. One in English literature and writing, and the other was in biochemistry.
wow.
I actually went to
Okay.
medical school for a year and then decided, I never gave writing a chance. I never, I had that passion, but I was always told by professors and family members, you can't really make a career out of writing, so you should do something, which is why I ended up going the medical school route. But I ended up leaving medical school, moving overseas for the adventure,
Mm.
and then I got two master's degrees one in Amsterdam in Scandinavian literature, and one at the University of Edinburgh in creative writing, and that's where I wrote my first book.
Fantastic. Wow, you are certainly so you were out there doing the adventure young. So how old are
Yeah.
you at this point?
I just turned 40, so I'm not quite young. I'm not super young, but
Oh, no, but at the time when you were doing your study in that.
yeah, I mean, I was at the university for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So a
so
lot of
I
your
mean,
20s is spent there,
my
basically?
all of my 20s was at university. But
Gotcha. Yeah.
I love school. I love academics. If somebody could pay me to just be a professional student, I would do
Yeah.
that. That would be like the best job for me. I would just get degree after degree after degree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. And that well, that just means you're a sponge. You
Yeah,
crave knowledge.
I do.
Just
I
give
love
me
it.
more knowledge, you know? And which is a great thing, and I'm sure all this knowledge really informs you with your writing, especially, you know, with some of your well, some of the medical stuff, you probably got a good handle on some of that language, correct? When you
Yeah,
have
I
to
do.
get into
My
those moments?
autopsy scenes are pretty good. I have
They're
a f
pretty
my first
tight.
2
Yeah,
books my first 2 books are crime thrillers of the
yeah,
Scandinavian noir,
yeah.
genre, and I do have a few scenes with the medical professionals, and
Mm,
I always felt very strong about those
mm.
scenes, so I think that did help a lot.
What keyed you into that specific kind of is it a subgenre or is it a genre on its own? How
Yeah,
would you
it's a
define that
subgenre.
noir? Yeah, it's a subgenre.
Um
What attracted you to jump into that?
It's funny because I never really intended to write thrillers at all. That wasn't,
Mm,
the genre I initially thought I would write in. Um, my mother's family is from Norway and Sweden, so I got into reading a lot of Scandinavian and Nordic noir from them, and
okay.
I enjoyed it so much that I got a master's in Scandinavian literature. I just really loved it.
Yeah.
And then when I decided to start writing a book, I was actually writing something completely different that was not anywhere near
Mm,
crime or Scandi noir or anything like that. And then unfortunately, there was a death in my family, and after
mm,
this person passed, I just couldn't write what I was writing beforehand. I
mm.
just had to let out a lot of these emotions that I had, a lot of these feelings, and that's how I ended up writing my first book. And then I just got really lucky that that book was picked up by a publisher.
That
That's
I mean, that's amazing. Your first book. I mean, that's incredible. What's that process like? So you write a book, right? You've written it. Do you have to acquire an agent first, or did you just send it to publishers?
So I did it kind of the weird way. So the normal way, I guess you could say, is that you write a book, you query out to agents to
Yep.
represent you. You hopefully secure an agent, and then that agent goes on and tries to sell your book to publishers. When
Mm,
I finished my book, I did that process. I sent it out to a bunch of agents. I got some interest. I didn't get any offers of representation. Um, so I thought to myself, well, you know, there were a few publishers at that time that had open submissions that were open to people who had agents or who were unagented. And I thought to myself, well, I'll just send it to one of these publishers directly. If they don't want it, I know the book is not good enough for print. And I know I have
mm,
to go back to the drawing board, write something different. It's my first book. I'm fine. I understand.
mm.
And so I sent it out to a few of these publishers. And actually, I had multiple offers from publishers directly
Oh, wow.
on the book. And so I actually negotiated my first book contract by myself, which was very stressful, very difficult. Uh, and it wasn't until after those 2 books came out that I was able to secure an agent, later on
Wow.
when
Okay,
one of
that's
those yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so when one
Yeah,
of those books was nominated for an award at this, literary festival in New York, I went to that festival, and the festival
yeah.
had a process where you could meet agents directly and have them look at 5 pages of your writing and kind of get some advice on maybe why your writing wasn't being picked up or why
Yeah.
what you could do to improve, and I did that, and I met with 5 different agents, and I left New York with 5 different offers.
Oh,
Um,
that is incredible. That's great.
yeah.
And the validation and that feeling must have been incredible at the time. Going, look, I knew I had to do this. And I'm sure that was at behind of it. It's like you didn't have a choice. I've got to write this book.
Yeah. You know,
And I
I
find
had
that
to get the feelings out. I had to get that story out. It was a story that
yeah,
wanted to be told. Um, and you know, my first book, hasn't had a lot of readers,
yeah,
but I'm still incredibly proud of it. I think for me, it was the book that I had to write first in order to be able to write anything else.
yeah. Okay. How long did that process take you to write it?
I would say that from start to finish, that first book probably took me about 9 months.
Yeah,
Um, which, you know, 6 months of it was actually writing it, and then 3 months of it was editing it to
yeah.
be able to feel like it was
Drafts.
good enough to send out to people.
Yeah,
Uh, so
yeah.
it was for
And
me, it
on
was a pretty quick process.
yeah, and on average, is that like timeline wise, does it vary from novel to novel, or do you find yourself being able to put a output out in a certain time
Um,
frame?
So it was funny with my first book, my contract for my second book, which was part of it was a 2-book deal for my publisher. The second book, I only had on paper 6 months to write the second book. But when you factor in the fact that you're editing the first book at the same time you're supposed to be writing the second one, I did not manage my time very
Mm.
well, and I ended up having to write my second book in like 4 months.
Oh, wow,
Um,
okay. Yeah.
and and the first draft was horrible. It was bad. Um, and my publisher gave me an extra month to kind of go through and make some big changes, and I basically rewrote 250 pages in like 4 weeks.
Wow,
And that ended up being almost exactly the draft that was printed. So
wow.
that was the
One of
fastest book I ever wrote.
That's great. One of the things that most impressive, I think, one of the more impressive things about novelists, people who write books, is discipline. Discipline's a big part of your art form. And as someone who makes like video, like do a lot of corporate videos and that, sometimes I get creatively stuck in a rut and things like that. But to get through it, generally, it's the discipline of just getting
Yeah.
up and doing it and taking that. Do you have a very structured way you write? Do you do a
I
9 to 5 or do you just let it come organically?
Yeah, I'm more structured now because what I learned writing my first, I'll say 3 books or so, I learned that I have this tendency to kind of just hyper focus and forget everything else. So the house
Yeah.
wasn't clean, I wasn't eating well, I wasn't exercising, the stuff that you need to do in order to maintain a healthy creative lifestyle was getting put on the wayside.
Mm,
Friendships were falling apart because I was writing 7 days a week, and honestly the writing that I was doing during that wasn't really any better than anything else. And so
mm,
now I have a very strict process of I only write Monday through Friday unless I'm on a very tight deadline and I'm behind. And I try to do my writing before lunch. So any of the
fascinating.
creative thing I try to get out before lunch, because
Yeah.
I notice just with myself, once I eat lunch, I feel like the day is like it's a downward spiral from that point on. And maybe it's age, I don't know, but like if
No,
once I
no, look,
eat,
I gotta say, I'm exactly the same. When I do my editing, I do all my creative decisions, I do in the morning. And yeah, I'll have lunch and I'll go and have a nana nap for an hour or 2 if I
yeah,
can. And
I
then I'll
I
get
love
back up and
naps.
do, my work after that as well. So yeah, look, I think that's it. I think to fresher the brain, right?
Yeah.
Once you're caffeinated or whatever, you've had your brekkie,
Yeah.
boom, you're
It's
straight into
funny
it.
because I would say if somebody asked me, "What do you think is the best time? When are you that you're most creative?" I said, "Honestly, I probably am my most creative, or at least I feel like I'm my most creative in the evenings.
Yeah.
But I'm not as productive in the evenings. And I feel like if I just wake up and I say to myself, okay, I'm gonna do my goal is 1,500 words today. I know I usually do a timed writing method where I set a timer for 20 minutes. I just write as fast as possible. I know what I can write in 20 minutes if I'm
Mm,
focused. So I know how long it will take me to get exactly to 1,500 words. And I know that that's doable before lunch for me.
yeah.
But I also know that if I am sitting at my computer and 2 hours have passed and I've only written one sentence, I also know that it's not my day. And
Yeah.
I stand up and I do something else. I make social media posts or marketing things or I film TikToks or I do something fun, an outlet to get myself back in the
Yeah, the
mindset to
the
focus.
distraction is the key, isn't it, in those
Yeah.
moments? Because I that definitely resonates with me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you find yourself how often do you find yourself in the zone? Because every artist, everything, no matter what you do, if you're creating something, there's that zone, right? That
Yeah,
pocket
that's true.
where time and space just goes.
It's funny because and this is the funny thing is because people are always asking like how do you stay inspired and how do you stay in that zone? And honestly, if I think back on the work that I've written that actually has been published, I think very little of it at the time, I didn't feel like I was in the zone. Usually if I'm having that moment, it's either at the beginning of the process where it's the first part of the book, like the first 50
Mm,
pages or so. For me, the first 50 pages is always the most inspiring. And after the
yeah.
first 50 pages is for me, it's like the dead zone. It's that middle part of the book is the hardest part to write. So I feel
Mm.
like the most in my zone if I'm starting the project, and then the most in my zone when I'm ending the project. But that 200 pages in the middle is a slog. And it's a
So you
slog for
write
most authors.
chronologically then? You write from beginning to end generally in your first draft?
My first 3 books, I wrote chronologically.
Yeah.
My 4th one, which comes out next month, I did not. It
It's the
was
first time not
tot
doing that.
it was my
Yeah,
first
okay.
time not doing it, and it was hard,
Yeah.
because you have to then go back and figure out where the puzzle pieces go together.
You'd be
Um,
mapping it out in a document somewhere, wouldn't you? Like,
I mean,
that's
I
how I do.
usually have a plot document to follow so that I usually can tell, "Oh, I know what
Yeah.
the next chapter is." I can write it, and if for some reason that chapter is boring and I wanna write something more exciting, I can skip ahead. But when I wrote my last book, somehow I wrote the entire book and it was 30,000 words too short. I don't know how I
Okay.
did it,
Wow.
but it was
Yeah.
way too short. I was like, "I can't turn this in." And so I
Mm.
had to figure out how to fit in 30,000 new words of story, and I ended up having to I added 2 new characters and gave them point of view
Oh,
chapters, and,
wow.
that's where the extra 30,000 came from. Originally, it was 1 person's point of view for the entire book, and now the book has, like, 4 points of view.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
so
So
that was
that
an
sometimes
adventure.
out of necessity comes that
Yeah,
creativity,
that's
isn't
true.
it?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
But it all
Um,
comes down like you said, it all comes down to the discipline. That is the hardest part. It's just
it is.
making
I
the
go through
time.
Yeah, I go through
Yeah,
this emotional roller coaster in a lot of videos that I make, and that is I'll go out and film it, and then I'll come back to the editing bay and I'll go for this thing where I'll look at the footage and I go, "Oh no, what have I done? This is horrible. This is
yeah,
unbelievable." Then I'll start to put it together and go, "No, actually, it's coming. I could see it there, and I get inspired and I'll go through it." Then I'll go back to this is the I should be in prison for how bad this video is. What am I doing? I'm a hack. And then it comes back again. And by the end, I'm
yeah.
very proud of kind of what I've done, but I never feel like I finish everything because I
No.
go, I have to, in a way, abandon it. Because
Yeah,
otherwise, I'd just be there forever doing
yeah.
tiny little, like, and is that something that is familiar to you in the sense of,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. People are always one of the questions people ask a lot is like, "Do you reread your own work?" No. I try
mm,
not to because in the process of working on it, I've read it 75 times.
yeah,
Um, and
I know
honestly,
how it ends.
yeah, I know how it ends. It's and that actually, that's exactly what makes writing so difficult and why I think people feel like they're unmotivated or uninspired is because you as a writer kind of know the direction the story is going. You know how it ends. It's hard to surprise yourself, but you have to remind yourself that your readers they don't know what's happening on the next page. They don't know how it's going to end. And so
Yeah,
what to you is not surprising, to somebody else is surprising. And
yeah,
I like you, I'm the same way. I'll read it and I'll be like, "This is the worst chapter I've ever written. Like, who would read this? This is horrible." Or "This is the worst book I've ever written. Nobody will read this." And then, you step away for a week, you read it again, you're like, that's a nice paragraph. Like, that's
yeah,
good. Like, somebody
that
give that
works.
paragraph an award. Like, that's a great sentence? So
I find
it's an up and
myself,
down.
I find myself, if I'm, like I said, watching something that you don't realize, remember the audience has never seen it, but I've seen it a million times. I tend to always judge that first instinct. If I do a cut or something, I go, "Oh wow, that's like there's a real poignant moment now. I've got that poignant moment." And but you've done a lot of things, you forget about it. I always just trust my instinct with it.
Yeah.
Generally kind of turns out right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing about creating too is, and I think what holds a lot of people back, is just doing it and
Yeah.
being okay with when you start out that it's not going to be perfect. That we all, no matter what you do, including this stuff, podcasting, the first time you do this, you're not as good as you're always going to be. But the whole thing is, if just do it,
I
because
absolutely. I think the problem with the creative industry, is, you rarely get to see somebody's, rough draft, so to speak. You only ever see the finished product. You go to the bookstore, you see the book on the shelf. You see the most perfect polished version of that story. You don't see the first version that literally the nobody saw. And with all art form, with film, video, you know, other mediums, paintings, you don't
any
see that
art form
first
you can
step.
think of, yeah, music, like
Nothing is good the first time around. It
no,
takes time.
definitely not. It definitely not. And you find that it's like molding clay, isn't it? Like your first
Yeah.
piece, you're going to look like that bad ashtray that
Yeah.
you gave to your grandma, we made 40 years ago.
Right.
But in the end, you keep going at it, you're going to get a good
Yeah.
sculpture. But the main thing is you wouldn't be there now. I'm a big believer in the 10,000 hours is basically what I'm getting at. That
Yeah.
10,000 hours theory, that Malcolm Gladwell, that the idea that you put 10,000 hours into something, you're going to find yourself pretty darn good at it at the end.
Yeah. I think
So
that's
it
true.
takes you to be an expert 10,000 hours. I
Yeah.
don't think that's an accurate per hour, but it's the idea of just putting in the time.
Right. And I
Absolutely.
think too, as artists, I think artists are also not the best judge of their own work. Um, I think we're
Oh,
always
yeah.
a little skeptical. We're way more critical of our own art form.
Yeah.
For example, the book of mine that I thought was literally the worst thing I had ever written,
Yeah.
was the one that was nominated for one of the most prestigious thriller awards. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. I thought it was a
Yeah.
joke.
So you're
Um,
thinking that one?
I was
That
like,
one
"That's
they
the
choose?
one you guys like?" But, when people come up to me and they say from a critical standpoint, "This is why this is your best book." Okay, I can see that. I
Yeah.
understand then why. But for me, it's always gonna feel like my worst one because it's the one that I slogged through, that I had the most trouble
Yeah.
writing, during the hardest time in my life. So I just sometimes you can't really trust the
Yeah.
artist.
No, you can't. People sometimes ask me, oh, yeah, what's your favorite video? What's your short film or anything that you love? And I go, it's not actually me. I let others decide whether they
Yeah.
like it or not. I mean, I'll have my own opinion. Of course, I like it. I made it, but it's really up to the people out there you make it for them to
It's
judge.
true. I mean, your work gets new life when it's taken in by somebody else. If you're in
Yeah,
a movie, your viewers are the ones that kind of turn it into something else. If you write a
yeah,
book, your readers are what make it into something else. So a lot of times for me, which I know a
yeah,
lot of authors, especially young writers trying to become authors, struggle with this. I just let them go. When the
yeah,
book is done, when it's out, it's in print, I can't do anything about it anymore. It's in the
yeah,
hands of people to either like it or not like it. The
yeah,
characters, whether a character is a good character or a bad character, it's not up to me to
mm,
decide. I leave it into their hands, and I just move on to the next thing and
yeah, yeah.
let it
Yeah, it's
go.
it's it's very hard to hold on to stuff once you've created, I think. I think it's
Yeah,
it's that's the spice of life, that's the adventure of life of what's next.
yeah,
What can we do
exactly.
next time?
It's always something more exciting on the horizon. It seems like.
Absolutely, absolutely, and, how do you keep yourself from? Because 'cause I'm sure when you're writing books that, yeah, all of a sudden, "I've got this idea for a book. I've got this idea. I've got this idea." Is there a challenge to go, "No, no ideas. Go over there in the
Yeah,
corner.
this
I'll
is me
deal with
right
you
now.
later." Yeah, it is it?
It
Yeah.
is hard, and, I think it depends on where you are in for one, if it's a career or if it's a hobby, that's a
Mm.
totally different thing, but also maybe where you are in your career and what it is you're trying to achieve. For me right now, I'm actually having that problem at this moment. I think in the year 2024, I've started 6 different books, and all of
Alright,
them
okay.
all of them are sitting between, I would say, 15 and 40,000 words. And
Yeah,
I'm at the point now where I have to pick one of them and
yeah,
fully invest in it.
yeah.
And I don't think none of them is the wrong answer. They're all
Mm.
they're all great options. They're all good choices. It's just trying to decide on the one hand which one is going to be the most creatively inspiring for me to write. Which one am I going to enjoy writing? Because I want it to be in a joyful process. I don't want to
Yeah,
have to push myself to write something that I'm just not feeling anymore. But on the other hand, on the business side, which
yeah,
one do I think is marketable? Which one do I think
yeah.
is going to
Be the
inspire the
most
most interest?
commercial. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so
absolutely.
that is difficult. That's a difficult balance
Yeah.
when you're at a certain stage in your
Yeah.
career as an
You
artist.
hear like film directors and that go when they get in a position where they're doing it, they try to do one for the studio and one for them.
Yeah,
That
I
kind
like
of
that.
one for one kind of thing. And
Yeah,
that way they can feel like, hey, look, yeah, maybe I'm having to do something I don't want to do, but my next project's going to be a
yeah.
passion project. Is it the kind of thing, if you've got all these different pathways, do you find yourself occasionally, I'm sure that's not the first time it's happened to you, where you draw ideas from other stories and you've gone, well, I was going to have that over there, but I might actually now take that element and infuse it
Absolutely.
into. Yeah.
Actually, the book that I have coming out next month, it
Mm,
originally so it's a part it's not it's a standalone, so it's not something that goes with anything. But when you write books, normally you get a two-book deal, and those two books usually have to have some similarity thematically. The publisher
mm,
likes it if you have two books that are very similar to each other because it's easier for them to market it to readers. You know, if you liked this book, you'll
mm,
like this one. So this one was supposed to be this is the companion piece, quote unquote, to Sweet Little Lies. So it was supposed to feel a lot like Sweet Little Lies did. Um,
mm,
but I realized in the writing process of it that I really wanted to add like a supernatural element. Um, and that was not in my contract. My editor didn't know about that. My agent didn't
mhm,
know about that. And I just felt like, you know what? I was going to save this for my next book, but why wait? Let's just
mhm.
throw it in and see what happens. Um, and I did, and they were excited by it. They thought it was a fun, interesting twist on the
Mm.
psychological thriller to add this element that may or may not be supernatural, but there is something there.
Oh, very
And
cool.
so it stayed in the book, and so I'm excited because that wasn't supposed to be part of the book. That was supposed to be part of the next book. Um, but you
So
know,
you'd written
I
most of the
loaned
book
it.
and then threw that element in?
That
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 must have
got
been fun because
that
all of a sudden, what does that do to the reaction of the character? It redefines everything, doesn't
It
it?
really did because one of the things that my story was lacking when I first wrote it, which is a huge thing that's important, and this is
Mm,
important for TV and film and
mm,
books, is that the protagonist, whoever your main character is, good or bad or neutral,
mm,
they have to have something interesting about them that kind of pulls you in and kind of like secures you as a
mm,
okay, I'm intrigued enough to continue further. And I felt like my character was missing that. And so when I realized the book was too short and I came up with this extra 30,000 words, it's in
mm,
that extra 30,000 words that I found this element that would make my
mm,
character more intriguing to readers. And that really actually formed a lot of what makes the
mm.
book interesting, I think.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. I can like I said, I can imagine that just being a fun time to write it though,
yeah.
because all of a sudden the ideas must have been just firing off left,
It
right, and
was,
center.
and the exciting thing about it too, and I think this is the thing that all artists strive for, and writers in particular, is that moment where you think to yourself, "Oh, this is really going to pull the reader in because this is really going to excite them." They're gonna be, like, confused because they're gonna wonder, can I trust this person, what they're saying to me? This new element that's added, is it real? Like, is
Mm,
that really happening or is she just saying it's happening? And then so it adds that level of suspense and engagement between the story and the reader because the reader has to decide while they're going along how much they believe of what's going on and how much they think is just fantasy on the point of somebody's point of view.
oh, just
And that
great.
was
So,
exciting. That was fun.
you like different people can read it, and they'll both
Yeah.
come out with a completely different theory at the end, or a perception of it on the end.
I mean, I think you could I think it's possible for both. I actually
Would
had that with Sweet Little Lies, which really surprised me. Without spoiling it,
mm,
both of my parents read, Sweet Little Lies, and they both took a completely different perspective on the ending. And I was shocked
mm,
because in my head, it was very clear
mm.
what happened at the end. But to them, you know, one took a way more optimistic and positive outlook to it, and the other one was like, oh no, dread. And so I
That
think
must have been really cool too,
it was
because
cool.
that's an extra dimension you weren't expecting.
I wasn't. And so I tried to maybe see if this new book could do the same thing. So I guess we'll find out if it does.
And that's next. You're hoping that's when's that one gonna hopefully be released out in
It is
the
out
public?
on November 7th.
November 7th.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's really exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and then do you take a break? Do you take a break after? Do you give yourself a time of respite, or no? You're pretty quickly getting into the next thing.
I mean, I was working on the next book almost immediately after turning this one in. And then but then back in April I actually fell off a horse and had a
Oh
concussion. And
no.
so I was kind of forced to take a few months off just
Yeah.
because I
Poor
couldn't
thing.
focus at the screen anymore. Um,
Wow.
so now my new rule is going to be to take some time off in between because I think it's just good to kind of, you know, replenish refill the well, so to speak, read other people's works, catch
Mm,
up on TV that might inspire me. But I also just kind of read outside of the genre that I'm writing and kind of
mm.
just get a different perspective of what's out there. And
I think that sometimes people who are not creative, they maybe not realize that when you throw yourself, especially in artist, fine artists, when you throw yourself into a project, you're generally throwing everything in. Like, and that means cutting out sometimes what's happening in the zeitgeist,
yeah,
or
yeah,
those little things and stuff like that. That I do think it's important sometimes to reattach, and my wife puts me on what forced holidays. Like, we're
yeah,
going away here, you're getting out of the studio room. Yeah, stay away from editing, babe. We're going to do something, and
yeah.
thank God that she does that because that keeps me sane. I really
I
do.
mean,
So,
that is 100% the reason why I made the decision never to work in the weekends anymore unless I absolutely had to,
mm,
because I realized how much I was losing from friendships, from family, just not
mm,
spending time with people,
yeah,
just not getting out. And honestly, I feel like you have to do those things in order to stay creative. You can't
yeah,
really stay creative in a bubble.
yeah,
You need to be able to engage with life, your surroundings, other media, other works,
yeah.
to keep your own self going, I think, creatively. And
Well, it's
I
it's
really
part
miss
of the
that.
fuel to replenish you, is
Yeah,
having
exactly.
human interaction and getting
Yeah.
out there, and that generally helps inspire,
And you
the
never
next
know
one.
when somebody is going to say something so weird that you think to
Yeah.
yourself, "Oh, that's going into the story."
Yeah,
Because
yeah, I'm
sometimes you
keeping
go to
that
the
one.
grocery store and you're just
Yeah,
standing there looking at, like, the apples or something, and just some random stranger says something to you, and you're just like,
yeah,
"Well, that's definitely going
yeah.
into a book because that was so weird."
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
would you
That's
wouldn't
that's
get
a
that
gift.
experience if you didn't
You
go
wanna go
out,
up to
so
them later and go, "Thanks for that, that's going in my book." So, there you go. You ever wanted to, and I'm sure there's part of you, to try to merge these 2 sides of you, have you ever contemplated wanting to write anything in the Star Trek universe?
Absolutely. I would love to write in the Star Trek universe. I actually have a document on my computer of potential Star Trek book plots that I would love
Yeah,
to
because I
write.
reckon you'd have some pretty cool ideas up your
Oh, yeah.
sleeve.
I have
Um,
one idea right now that I can't share because if it ever comes out,
no,
I
don't.
want it to happen.
Don't.
But
Yeah,
I feel so strongly that this would be a great Star Trek
yeah,
book, that the first opportunity I get to present it, I definitely will.
yeah.
Um,
Fantastic.
Unfortunately, the IP writing process is a little bit, tricky to manage, and I've actually reached out to some people who have worked previously in Star Trek, books,
Yeah.
and they're going through a shift right now in their publishing, so I'm kind of waiting for them to
I
figure
let the
out what.
dust settle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm waiting for that, and then I'm going to see what I can do.
yeah.
But yeah, I would love to write an IP, and not even just Star Trek. I mean, I would be interested in writing Star Wars,
Oh, yes,
Marvel.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah, look,
so much out there that would be fun
and
to explore.
there is, and the great thing about, those particular franchises, how expansive you can do things in pocket little areas, you can do things that directly tie into main characters, you don't have to,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, the
Um,
Star Wars book publishing right now is just on fire.
yeah,
They are fantastic. They are pushing out book after book for
yeah,
various ages. I mean, they are really showing how that model can be successful right now, and they're
wow.
doing
I'm,
fantastic.
the last time I read a Star Wars book was the Thrawn trilogy.
Oh,
That's the last
I
time I
love the
read,
Thrawn
yeah,
trilogy. I mean, that was the
yeah,
Timothy Zahn
absolutely.
era was like that was the
Yeah, that
golden
was it.
age of
Well,
Star Wars books for us.
for me, like, yeah, after Jedi, that was it.
Yeah.
Maybe you got the cartoon droids, like we got them for a
Yeah,
couple of
right.
years. But Star Wars is the only way it kind of maintained and was kept alive, was very much to do with the novels. The novels. And Timothy Zahn doesn't get enough credit for really keeping that flame burning strong
He
in the
did.
early
Yeah.
90s before we started to see that George Lucas was interested in continuing with the franchise. So and yeah, now it's playing out in a way. That trilogy is playing out in its own kind of manifested way through Dave Filoni's Ahsoka
Mhm.
and what they're. I know that's what they're doing with
Yeah.
Mandalorian and Grogu, who's going to be leading to that kind of thing. So, which I absolutely love.
Well, I mean, those books really they kept me and my nerdy friends reading when we were younger. I
Mm.
mean, The Courtship of Princess Leia was one of my favorite books when I was in junior high. I love that. I
Mm.
Jedi, fantastic. My
Mm.
friends were reading the Boba Fett series, the Han Solo trilogy. I mean,
Yeah.
those books were just, they were great because they were characters you never felt like you had enough of back then because you
No.
didn't have anything other than the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and it was a way to expand that universe
yeah.
and still connect, stay with those characters. You know, I've said this thing recently to some friends of mine. I think it's time to do it. I think it's time to recast Luke. Like, you've already got your Han, because I love old Nenreich. And I think it's time, and I think the audience would accept it. And we start getting either more movies, or series with the three set either between Star Wars and Empire, which is
Oh,
probably
you
the
want Shadow
sweet
of the
spot.
Empire.
I wouldn't say no to Shadow of the Empire. I would be
I
honest
mean,
with you.
I
But the
always thought,
idea of not letting those characters die off and
yeah.
recasting them, I think it'd be a bold move, but I think the audience would be ready to accept it.
I think if they did it in the same way that Star Trek has done Strange New Worlds, I
Exactly.
think that is the way to do it. I think
That's the template.
you have to take what was so important about the character, was so memorable, but then like build on it. Show us a different side of who these people are. I saw a really
Yeah.
interesting video actually this morning of somebody who was doing a critique of women in the Star Wars universe, and they were discussing how if you pay attention to all of the original women in the trilogies, Padme, Leia, their characters were already developed before the film started, so they didn't
Mm,
really have their character development was done.
mm.
Their purpose was to help the Luke characters, the Han characters, develop their characterization.
Yeah, that's
So
a
it would
good
be
point.
exciting to see those characters at a more vulnerable time in their life,
Yeah, yeah,
when they didn't know who they were. Like Leia, before she has decided to take on her role in the rebellion, did
yeah.
she struggle? Did she
That's right. Did she
waver?
even want it? That's right.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. And what struggles with that?
there's a huge potential for storytelling there.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
like you said, if they recasted something and have it set in the middle between Empire and Return, any moments
yeah.
of doubt in characters that previously didn't. I mean, there's a lot that you could explore there. That could be fun.
Absolutely. I think there would be a lot to do. And I think a good example of how they've done that was Andor as well.
Oh yeah,
I think
I agree.
expanding on that kind of period. Like, I love the geopolitical stuff in Andor's my favorite. Just
Yeah,
seeing how the empire bureaucracy works is
yeah,
amazing, you know. Yeah, I think there's a lot to mine there. And Star Trek, you're talking about Strange New World. To me, is the jewel in the crown of the new series. It's my favorite.
I
I'm
love
pretty
it.
biased with that because I love everything they've done, and I love that they've taken big swings. A musical episode, I
I love
liked
the
it.
music.
I don't
I
care
loved
because
it.
I love musicals anyway. You know,
Yeah,
I'm a big musical fan. So at the end of the day, that's just the fact that they are willing to do that. And you're right, they're taking all the best elements, but we're getting to see a different Spock,
yeah.
you know, which is fantastic. And seeing Pike the way they've taken Pike is absolutely amazing. And development, all those characters in there, Uhura and things like that. I
So
think they've
I
just
think
nailed it.
Uhura is so fascinating to me, and I'm so excited that
Mm,
we've got this opportunity to see her in this role because also she was also kind of a Leia character. She was also very fully
yeah,
formed. She knew who she was. She was very strong in
yeah,
her shoes, so to speak. So to be able to see her younger and doubting herself when we all know how capable she is. I mean,
yeah.
that's exciting. That's exciting storytelling. And then
Mm,
to play off the same thing with Spock as well. I mean, they are doing some great things in that show, writing wise. Like you said,
yeah.
I loved the musical episode. I thought that was very well done. And musicals are hard to do. I mean, it's hard to
Yeah.
do them.
Well, you
Um,
have to make music that sounds good.
yeah,
And just about all the numbers sounded great.
they
I was
did.
very happy with all the musical numbers. Then you have to have a story that binds it together,
Yeah.
that works, and they do. They're not afraid to have a wink and a nod at the franchise as
No.
well. And I think that's really great and bold as well.
Yeah.
Because, there are a lot of fans. I'm going to keep it serious, got to keep it. Yes, I love Deep Space Nine. I love Serious Track. I love profound storytelling. Sometimes I like it a little bit lighter as well,
Yeah. And I
and a
think Star
musical
Trek has
sits with
always been
that.
pretty good about that. It's been pretty good at
Yeah,
balancing the heavy thematic, even traumatic episodes with something more lighthearted. For every really heavy Dominion episode, you get an episode of Quark trying
Yeah,
to scam somebody,
yeah,
and so I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
Strange New Worlds is doing a really good job of balancing that and making it feel episodic, but still having enough through lines
Yeah, I,
that
I I
watching it
suppose
feels
I
like it'll be good.
do have a little bit of episodic bias. That's probably got something to do with it. Plus, I also think they're making a very modern, fresh take on what is essentially a story from supposed to be based in the '60s
Yep.
version, which was 70 years prior to Next Generation and all that. So I think they do a great job because I also think they're going. It's not. We're not leading to Star Trek starring William Shatner. We're going to that slightly alternate universe now, alternate timeline, aren't we? And I suppose that's up for debate, isn't it? What timeline are
Yeah,
we on with Strange New Worlds? Because
I feel like they're at a point where it could go either way.
could
And I
go.
feel
I'd
like
be
it could
very
still
comfortable them going off.
I mean, I would be too. Honestly, at this point, they've given us enough subtle differences to kind of test. I think they've tried to test the waters, with T'Pring especially.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of a test to
Yes.
see is the audience going to accept if we push away from TOS.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine if they do. I think that there's enough interesting story there to go in a different direction, to
Yeah.
go not even in that we go in a third direction. We're not going towards TOS. We're not going towards, you know, the 2009 films.
Yeah.
We are going in a direction that, uh, pays homage to what came before it
Yeah.
respectfully, but also adds something fresh and new to it that will engage
Exactly.
both the old and the new fans of the show. So I think I would be okay with them doing that.
And I think they can do it now because we're smarter audiences these days. We can
Yeah.
accept those kind of thematic kind of risks and
Yeah.
and storytelling, and because we've seen been done before. So
Well, and
no,
it doesn't
absolutely,
it doesn't dismiss anything that came before. The old stuff is always going to exist. It's always going to be there. You can still enjoy it, but you can also enjoy a new direction, seeing
yeah,
whether Spock makes a different decision. Um,
yeah,
is Pike's future truly set in stone? Still, I feel like
yeah.
that's kind of up to debate.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping he doesn't. I don't really want him ended up,
Yeah,
especially this version of Pike ending up in the chair. I really
yeah.
don't.
No,
There's such a
true.
torturous existence for him.
Yeah, it really
You don't want that. He's got too great a hair for that to happen, Karen.
absolutely. But I mean, even characters like Lon, like I love that
Yes.
character. I was a little bit suspicious at first. I was like, okay, I'm gonna
Uh,
hold my thoughts and opinions. But one of the characters I love the most in that show, and I feel
uh,
also a character that has so much interesting history built into her already. Honestly, I would love to see more interactions with her and the new Kirk. I'd like to see,
it was a great episode. I was going to mention
yeah,
that episode. It really was because of what's a very sad episode in a way in
it
the end
is.
because it's love well, unrequited, as they say. Is that the
Yeah.
word? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean,
Because
it's
she has
really
the experience and then loses the experience
yeah.
at the same time and has to carry on. Yeah, I think
But there
that's a
was a
great
lot of
episode.
chemistry there that I that
A
I
lot.
was I wasn't expecting, and to me also kind of reflected the opposite of the chemistry of what we see between, Shatner and Montalban in the previous films. The
Mm,
chemistry that they had was also really strong, very dynamic,
mm,
but with a different level of tension. And I think that these new actors have done a fantastic job of like building that as well, but from the opposite point of view. And I would
yeah.
like to see that go further.
Well, I like to think what's been really good, especially with and I'll give props to the new Kirk actor, and why I defend it because people say, "Oh, it's very different." Well, no, it's his interpretation of that core character. He's read that
Mhm.
character that way, and I think it works because if you even attempt, and even Chris Pine, who expertly handled it, but he even pushed the edge of maybe going too far in
Mhm.
towards a Shatner Kirk, but he found the sweet spot,
Yeah.
and I think that's very hard, and I think also having this Kirk that is not predictable is opportunistic for great storytelling.
I think
Because
Paul
we're either
Wesley
going to
is
go in that direction
yeah.
or he's going to learn from things and go in a different direction.
I
So,
think Paul Wesley's done a great job because essentially
oh
we've
yeah,
seen 3 different Kirk. We haven't even seen we've seen like one version of what this universe's Kirk is
Yes.
really supposed to be. So,
Yeah.
and I like that I feel like he looked at Kirk and saw, well, Kirk is the youngest Starfleet captain. He's the only person that can beat Spock in chess. And
Mm,
so I think he took it as more of like this guy he's an action hero. He's funny. He's charming, but he's
mm,
smart. He's an
mm,
intellectual, you know?
mm,
And I think that Paul Wesley is playing on younger Kirk, leaning into that intellectual side a little bit more
mm.
and then waiting maybe until he becomes captain to kind of loosen up and,
Yeah, be a bit more roguish
right.
in a
So
way.
I like it as well. I think it has
Yeah.
some great potential because he also has to, if you think about where they all are in their timelines, they're all growing into who they are. They haven't, Spock hasn't found out who he is yet. Uhura is still struggling to see who she is. The only
Yeah.
character that really knows who he is Pike, and that's because he
Yeah.
has the benefit of or detriment of foresight. So
Yeah. That's right.
it's an
That's right. But
interesting,
he's still got an emotional arc that he
yeah.
needs to finish though. So I think that's great. All right, Karen, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you. Now, how do people find your books? How can they buy your books, which they should be doing right now?
So my books are for sale wherever books are sold. My first 3 books are all available in paperback, audiobook, and ebook. The paperback for Sweet Little Lies is actually coming out in the US for the first time on November 5th, and it should be in stores. So that's exciting. But
That's exciting.
everywhere else should be able to get it fine. The US is just a little bit late on the paperback. And then my new book, The Man in Room 7, comes out November 7th, also paperback, ebook, and audiobook. You can buy them wherever your favorite books are sold online, or you can go to your store and order them. They are also available on libraries, so you can check them out from your local
There you
library as
go, guys.
well.
Remember them
Yeah,
libraries? There were
yeah,
buildings with books inside them. There you
exactly.
go.
Yeah,
Where else
but
can they find you on social? You do podcasting as well, don't you, Karen?
I do. I am on another Frackin' podcast with my friends Joe and Van. We talk about nerdy sci-fi fantasy topics.
Awesome.
We are actually doing a show live tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 1 p.m. GMT. I don't know what that is in
Fantastic.
Australia time, but tomorrow we're going to be talking about
Tomorrow evening, I think, for
evening.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tomorrow we'll be talking about our favorite villains in sci-fi and fantasy. So that'll be a fun conversation, I
Oh,
think.
that's a big subject. Big
It's
thing to
gonna be a
tackle
long
there for
episode.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a long episode, I think. Yeah, but we talk about all things nerdy. And then of course, if you want to see my crazy cosplay videos or my Star Trek discussion videos, you can find
Her
me at
great
Jazzercise Loki on
videos.
TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love your name too, Jazzercise Loki. I did have
Yeah.
a laugh at that first time I saw that. No, but yeah, definitely check out your books, check out your podcast, check out all your social medias. Absolutely fantastic. It's been again lovely to chat to you.
Yes, thank you so much for
Fascinating
having
stuff.
me.
And we'll thanks, guys. If you do the right thing by me in this little podcast, if you can like, share, subscribe, let all your friends know. The idea is we're talking to the super coolest people in pop culture who are not, maybe not millionaires yet, but they will be soon. So we'll catch you
Fingers crossed.
next time, guys. Thanks for watching.